My name is Lily, and I'm 48 years old. I'm not usually one for sharing personal matters with strangers, but recent events have me questioning everything. I hope that writing it all down might bring some clarity, or at least make sense of what feels like an emotional labyrinth. My daughter, Amelia, is 25 now, a stunning, fiercely independent young woman. Yet our relationship has always been fraught. A lot of that goes back to her father, my ex-husband, who left me when Amelia was just 10 years old. He remarried a year later, choosing a glamorous woman named Sandra, who seemed to step seamlessly into the role of the mother Amelia always wanted. I tried to stay amicable, hoping for a civil co-parenting arrangement. But it was harder than I could have ever imagined. Sandra, though charming and polite on the surface, had a knack for undermining me. If I said no to something Amelia wanted, Sandra would swoop in and say yes. She encouraged Amelia to see herself as part of their real family, subtly implying that I was a fringe member, someone to be tolerated but not truly respected. This dynamic escalated as Amelia grew older. It wasn't long before I began feeling more like an acquaintance than a mother. Despite this, I never stopped loving my daughter. I fought to be part of her life, even though Amelia's allegiance clearly shifted towards her father and Sandra. Whenever I reached out to her, I was often met with indifference or resentment. At the time, I believed it was just typical teenage rebellion, but deep down I knew it ran much deeper. Years passed. When Amelia announced her engagement, I was thrilled. I thought perhaps we'd have a chance to bridge the chasm between us. I offered my support, both financially and emotionally, contributing to wedding expenses and helping her plan. I thought, naively I suppose, that this might be our fresh start. But as the big day approached, Amelia began to withdraw. Texts went unanswered, calls became brief, and when I did hear from her, she seemed distant. The rehearsal dinner was coming up, and I still hadn't received any confirmation on what time to arrive. I wondered if she even wanted me there, but I dismissed my worries, telling myself that she was just stressed with the wedding. The night of the rehearsal dinner, I showed up, cautiously optimistic. As I entered the room, filled with friends and family on both sides, I spotted Amelia at the head of the table. She was beaming, radiant, standing next to her soon-to-be husband. My heart swelled with pride. I thought, that's my girl. Just then, Amelia began introducing everyone to her in-laws. When she got to Sandra, she said, "This is Sandra, the woman who raised me." She didn't even look in my direction. Sandra's eyes glittered with a smug satisfaction. Everyone around the table raised their glasses in a toast to Sandra, the woman who raised Amelia. And there I was, sitting alone, invisible. For a moment, I considered standing up and saying something, anything, to acknowledge my role in Amelia's life. But I held back. I didn't want to ruin her night. As the evening continued, I felt my heart harden. It wasn't just sadness, it was anger too. I had spent years bending over backward to be part of her life, swallowing my pride to maintain some kind of relationship. But tonight, it felt like I'd reached the end of the line. After the dinner, Amelia approached me. I felt a flicker of hope, thinking maybe she would apologize, or at least acknowledge how hurtful her words had been. "Mom, can we talk privately?" she asked. We stepped outside, and for a brief moment, I thought she might reach out and say something kind. But instead, she launched into a tirade. "I didn't even want to invite you to my wedding," she hissed. "You've always been a burden to me. Pathetic. I'm embarrassed to have you here." I was stunned. Her words cut deeper than anything Sandra or her father had ever said. I had tried so hard to be there for her, yet here she was, tearing down every last bit of pride I had left. There was so much contempt in her voice. It was as if she genuinely believed I had been nothing but a nuisance in her life. As she walked away, I realized this wasn't just a bad night. This was how she truly felt. And I knew I couldn't be there for her wedding. Not after that. I returned to my hotel room, numb and heartbroken. I didn't sleep at all. I kept replaying her words over and over, wondering where I had gone wrong, what I could have done differently. The next morning, I was loading my bags into my car when my phone rang. It was Amelia. Her voice was frantic, tearful. "Mom, they've cut me off," she sobbed. "Dad and Sandra, they gave me these papers. I'm disinherited." I could barely believe what I was hearing. Amelia, the golden child, had finally been shown the true colors of the perfect family she had chosen. Apparently, her father and Sandra had decided that now, as a married woman, Amelia was no longer their responsibility. They presented her with documents that effectively severed all financial ties. They said I'm not part of the family anymore. Mom, I don't know what to do. For a moment, I felt a surge of pity. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be all right. But I stopped myself. Just hours ago, she had called me pathetic, a nobody, an embarrassment. Now, in her moment of crisis, she wanted my support. She pleaded with me to talk to her father, to convince him to change his mind. She even tried to guilt me, saying that if I didn't help, she and her husband would be trapped under mountains of debt. She insisted that her husband's financial future shouldn't be ruined because of her student loans, a loan she'd taken out at her father's suggestion, with promises that he'd help her pay it off. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Amelia, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, you made your choices. You chose your father's money over my love. You insulted me, dismissed me, told me I was nothing to you. I can't fix this for you. You're an adult now, and it's time you learn to stand on your own. She exploded, calling me selfish and petty. She accused me of holding grudges, of taking pleasure in her suffering. I held my ground, and for the first time in her life, I said no. I turned off my phone and drove home. I didn't attend the wedding. When I finally turned my phone back on, I had hundreds of messages from Amelia, her father, and even distant relatives. Some were angry, accusing me of ruining her big day. Others were supportive, knowing how much I'd endured over the years. Days turned into weeks. I tried to reach out to Amelia to offer her some guidance, but she ignored my calls. Eventually, I learned that her marriage was already on rocky ground. Her husband, it turned out, wasn't prepared to shoulder her debts, and they began to drift apart. Then one evening, Amelia finally picked up the phone. Her voice was hollow, defeated. She confessed that she didn't know how to manage her finances, that her husband was considering leaving her, and that she felt completely lost. She asked if I would come over to talk. When I arrived, Amelia looked like a shadow of herself. She was pale, her eyes red from crying. She told me everything, that her father and Sandra had never truly loved her, that they had used her to further their own image, and that now, she had no one left. We sat in silence for a long time, and then, slowly, I began to speak. I told her about all the years I had spent trying to be there for her, all the times I had felt invisible, yet held on because she was my daughter. I told her how deeply her words at the rehearsal dinner had hurt me, and how I had finally realized that I deserved respect too. Amelia broke down, apologizing over and over. I could see genuine regret in her eyes. But I also knew it would take time for us to truly mend. Months passed. Amelia began therapy, working through the tangled emotions left by years of favoritism and manipulation. She got a job, one that didn't pay much, but it was enough to start rebuilding her life. I helped her where I could, but I was careful not to give more than she needed. I wanted her to learn to be self-sufficient. Gradually, our relationship improved. She stopped seeing me as a bank account or an afterthought. We began spending time together, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to reconnect. It wasn't easy. Years of hurt don't disappear overnight. But we were healing. As for her father and Sandra, I've heard through the grapevine that their marriage is strained. Sandra, it turns out, has a history of demanding loyalty, and Amelia's father is beginning to feel the weight of her expectations. Part of me feels vindicated, but mostly, I feel relieved that I'm no longer caught in their web. Now, as I sit here, reflecting on everything that's happened, I feel a sense of peace I haven't felt in years. Amelia and I have a long way to go, but for the first time, I feel hopeful about our future. I've learned to respect my own boundaries, and I've taught Amelia to respect them too. It's been a painful journey, but one I wouldn't trade for anything. In losing the illusion of the perfect family, I've gained something much more valuable, a chance to rebuild, with honesty, respect, and, above all, love.